In the year 555 AD, the Roman Empire appeared to have returned. Under Emperor Justinian, its borders once again spanned from the Atlantic coast of Spain to the mountains of the Levant. But by the mid-7th century, that map had been torn apart. The state was pinned behind the Taurus Mountains in Anatolia, having lost more than half its territory in a single generation. This collapse was the direct result of the expansion that preceded it. Justinian's massive campaign to restore the West had overextended the East, creating the exact structural vulnerabilities that invited a systemic breakdown. To survive the coming Middle Ages, the Eastern Roman administration had to do the unthinkable. It had to abandon the universal Roman ideals that gave it legitimacy. We are going to trace how a series of massive external shocks forced the state to re-engineer its military recruitment, its legal code, and the very way it defined its place in the world. The empire that emerged was no longer a sprawling ancient superpower. It had become a compact, Greek-speaking medieval fortress. In the 6th century, Constantinople was the wealthiest city in the Mediterranean. The scale of the Hagia Sophia was designed to be a physical manifestation of that power, a centralized state capable of unparalleled engineering. This state operated under the ideology of Eusebius of Caesarea. The emperor was viewed as the direct imitator of God on earth, making the survival of the empire a matter of divine providence. This birthed the concept of the oikolene. In the imperial mind, the borders of the Roman state were required to perfectly overlap with the entire Christian world. To manage this vast entity, Justinian centralized all legal authority into the corpus juris civilis. He replaced centuries of messy, local precedents with a single, standardized Latin framework that only the emperor could interpret. The model worked through a specific resource loop. Tax revenue collected from the rich eastern provinces was used to recruit professional soldiers to wage wars of conquest in the West. Because the state lacked a deep pool of native soldiers, it relied on these expensive mercenary armies to dismantle the barbarian kingdoms of the Vandals and the Ostrogoths. The Justinianic model was an ideological triumph, but it was a logistical nightmare. It depended entirely on a constant, uninterrupted flow of gold from a centralized tax base. In 541 AD, the resource loop hit a biological catastrophe. The bubonic plague hit the Mediterranean, killing half the population of the capital. This chart shows the systemic impact. The drop in population did more than just empty the streets. It caused a terminal plunge in tax revenue. As the treasury emptied, the empire was forced to defend two fronts at once. Exhausted troops in Italy could not stop aggression from the east. The Sasanian Persians invaded, sacking Antioch, the empire's second most important economic hub. The eastern frontier, once the source of all the empire's wealth, was becoming its primary drain. The crisis reached its psychological limit when the Persians captured Jerusalem. They seized the true cross, removing Christianity's most sacred relic from the Holy Sepulchre. By 619, the Persians had taken Egypt. This ended the Anana, the free grain dole that had kept the population of Constantinople fed for centuries. These shocks proved that an overextended, tax-reliant empire cannot survive when its resource loop is cut. The old model had failed. When Heraclius took the throne in 610, he had no money and no army. To save the state, he had to completely rebuild its foundations. He turned the defense of the empire into a holy war, using the wealth of the church to fund a native military reorganization known as the theme system. The remaining imperial territory was divided into military districts, each under the command of a general who held both civil and military power. The state stopped paying soldiers in gold. Instead, it granted hereditary plots of land. The soldier was a farmer, supporting himself, ready to fight instantly. This localized defense in depth meant that even if one district fell, the others remained intact. It turned the Anatolian heartland into a resilient buffer that was nearly impossible to conquer permanently. This contraction in territory changed the culture. Since the Latin-speaking West was effectively gone, the state abandoned Latin in favor of Greek as the official language. Heraclius even changed his title. He dropped the Roman imperator for the Greek basileus, signaling the empire was now a Greek Orthodox state. By decentralizing the military and localizing the economy, Heraclius successfully rebooted the state, transforming it into a medieval power. But the recovery was immediately tested. In the 630s, newly unified Arab tribes launched an invasion that permanently redrew the map of the Mediterranean. Within decades, the empire had lost the Levant and Egypt once again, this time for good. The geographical reality of a universal Christian world was shattered. This loss triggered an internal crisis. The Isaurian emperors, searching for why God allowed these defeats, turned their attention to the use of religious icons. Emperor Leo III banned these images, viewing their veneration as a form of idolatry that had cost the empire its divine protection. By banning icons, he could also seize the wealth of the monasteries that produced them. This policy, known as iconoclasm, created a permanent religious rift with the papacy in Rome, which viewed the ban as heresy. The Pope realized that Constantinople, consumed by its internal religious debate and its eastern borders, could no longer protect Italy from the invading Lombards. To secure a new protector, the Pope crowned the Frankish king Charlemagne as Augustus in 800 AD. This act formally created a rival Western empire. The Arab conquests had physically broken the empire, but the internal responses, the shift to Greek identity and the conflict over icons, finished the job. By the 9th century, the idea of a single, universal Christian empire was gone, replaced by two distinct and divided Christendom. The state that survived into the Middle Ages was defined by its walls. It had given up on the dream of a Mediterranean lake in favor of a defensible Greek Orthodox fortress. These models show the magnitude of the change. One side, a Latin system of centralized taxes and mercenaries. The other, a Greek system of localized land grants. The universal model shattered once finances were interrupted. The state survived by trading universal pride for localized security. Byzantium endured for another 800 years by learning a hard lesson, that the idea of Rome had to die so that the state itself could live. This was the architecture of survival, the ability to face catastrophic loss not with rigid preservation, but with radical